for everyone's time, including our two candidates here. I'd like to take the time to welcome you to this candidate forum where we'll be listening to Mr. Dargis and Mr. Krishnamoorthi. We welcome you to Harper College, and we are pleased to co-host this event with the League of Women Voters of Palatine. My name is Dr. Stephanie Court, and I am actually English faculty at Harper. I've been here for 10 years, and this is an exciting place to both learn and work, and we're excited to welcome these two candidates here and to welcome you all to listen to their questions and to listen to their answers to these issues. So thank you very much, and at this time I would like to turn it over to Kathy Cortez, our contact and representative and new friend at League of Women Voters, and thank you so much for being here.
Good evening, and thank you for attending the forum this evening with candidates who are vying for the 8th District of the U.S. Congress. Can you all join me, please, very briefly, reach into your purses, your pockets, whatever you have, and please silence your phones so we don't have any interruptions during this important time, and we don't interrupt the speakers when they're giving a response. Thank you, Stephanie, for introducing me again. My name is Kathy Cortez. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Palatine area. We take in a pretty big area. We include Schaumburg, Hoffman Estates, Palatine, Rolling Meadows, Barrington, and some of their surrounding communities, and a few other areas in Cook and Lake counties. I do want to say a very big thank you to Harper for helping us host this. We are so excited to be playing to a full house, and it's really great to have all of you here. We have a number of students, if you wouldn't mind raising your hands, participating here today. Ladies, please. And we had a few other folks helping as well from school newspaper and a couple other parts of the school. Really, really excited and proud that we've been able to get some young blood involved in our forum this evening as well. The purpose for holding forums like the one today is to encourage civic responsibility and to promote active participation in our democratic process. Providing these forums enables members of the community to get better informed about the candidates who are running for office. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan but political organization. We neither support, oppose, nor endorse any candidate running for office. Any visual or verbal representations made by the candidates are theirs alone, and the League does not fact-check candidates. We don't fact-check their statements during the forum, and we ask that the candidates refrain from attributing any positions to their opponent. To ensure questions for today's forums were a good representation of lots of topics and different viewpoints, we solicited topics from candidates and the community at large. So questions for today's forum were prepared in advance. We used that feedback. We vetted them with a bipartisan team from League of Women Voters of Palatine, and we excluded any question deemed to be negative or directed to any specific candidate. We also included questions. There are a couple of them in there. There was a bit of overlap, but a couple of questions from the Harper students as well. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's moderator. Barb Laimins is a member and co-past president of the League of Women Voters in Wheaton. She served as a league moderator now for 5 years and is currently the coordinator of Civic Awareness Series held in partnership with Continue Park, which is a division of the McCormick Foundation. We're also pleased to have Vivian Madsen and Aisha Hernandez assisting the league today, and they're going to ask questions of the candidates tonight. Barbara?
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening to moderate this candidate forum. As a resident of the new District 3, Congressional District 3 in West Chicago, I am not eligible to vote in this election. So I've been asked to serve as an impartial facilitator for this discussion as a volunteer with the League of Women Voters. Let me take a few minutes to explain the format and the rules of the forum. All the candidates were contacted by mail, email, and phone, and have agreed to abide by the ground rules provided by the League of Women Voters. They are as follows. Candidates have drawn Candidates have determined they will go in alphabetical order to answer the questions. We will rotate this order throughout the forum for questions. Each question will be answered by both candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and a closing statement. We have allowed 1.5 minutes for them to answer questions. I will repeat the question, or the girls will repeat the question as needed. If desired, candidates may request a rebuttal. Each candidate may use a maximum of 2 rebuttals. Rebuttals will be timed and limited to 30 seconds each. We have timers located in the front row. They will be showing you a sign of 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and then stop. At that point, we'd like you to finish your thought, but not start on a new thought or a new point in your discussions. Today we will hear from candidates hoping to represent the 8th U.S. Congressional District. With us today and on the ballot are Republican challenger Christopher Dargis and incumbent Democrat Krishnamoorthi. I want to thank both of you for coming, and I want to thank both of you for spending time with us. We know that campaign time is valuable, and we thank you so much for being with us this evening. We will begin with your opening statements. Mr. Dargis, you'll go first. As soon as Isha joins me up here at the podium. Mr. Dargis, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. Thank you to Congressman Krishnamoorthi for being here. Thank you to all of you. My name is Chris Dargis. I'm running for Congress in Illinois' 8th Congressional District, and I'm running because Washington politicians have left us behind. We have been dealing for 2 years now with the issues created that are their failed policies that are crushing family budgets and making our communities unsafe. And they seem unwilling to help because they're wedded to their extreme ideology. You've heard a lot about the problems, you've heard the statistics and the numbers, but there's people involved here as well, our friends and our families and our neighbors. They're hurting because of these policies. We talk about inflation and the cost of living being at 8.5%, a 40-year high. But what that means is that 1 month of your paycheck is gone due to inflation. We talk about gas prices being at unprecedented levels. But when I go out in the district, I've spoken with single mothers who are afraid to fill their gas tanks more than halfway with gas because they're worried that if they do, they won't have enough left over to buy groceries to feed their children. Well, you hear about 87,000 IRS agents. As if we're not taxed enough, that's $20 billion more out of the poor and middle class just next year. And of course, we talk about crime. When was the last time any of us went in this beautiful city we live near without being worried about our safety or that of our family? We have a choice to make this November. We can continue with career politicians and the failed policies that are crushing the American dream, or we can make a change. I served as a naval officer and a nuclear engineer for 20 years. I've been a successful businessman, bringing solutions, bringing people together, delivering results. I'm asking for your vote because we deserve better. It's time for a change this November. Thank you so much. I look forward to the discussion.
Mr. Krishnamoorthi, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Good evening. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. Thank you to the League for organizing this. I think I'm in Congress because of my personal story. You see, I was born in India. I came to this country when I was 3 months old, and things were going just great until suddenly the recession of 1973 hit us very, very hard financially. But thanks to the generosity of the American people and its government, we were allowed to move into public housing and food stamps for a time. And thanks to that generosity, we were allowed to stay until my father could complete his studies and we could later find an excellent job in, of all places, Peoria, Illinois. And so they loaded up the U-Haul truck and started driving and driving until they reached Peoria. And that's really where the golden period of our lives began, because that's where we entered the middle class. And every night, my father and mother would say at the dinner table, think of the greatness of this country. Think of the greatness of this country, and whatever the two of you do, just make sure, my brother and me, that we're there for the next, that this country is there for the next families who need it. And so that has informed my work in Congress. I'm proud of my bill, which became a law, that modernizes vocational education for 11 million students annually throughout the country. I'm proud of my work for seniors to finally lower prescription drug prices starting this January as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm proud to stand with women who, if they don't have control of their bodies, cannot achieve the American dream. So I fight for their reproductive freedom. And I'm proud to work with our local mayors and law enforcement to usher hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve their ability to fight mental health crises that can escalate into violence, and to fight domestic violence in both Hoffman Estates and Schoenberg. That's why I've been endorsed by the Tribune and the Daily Herald. I look forward to answering your questions tonight. Thank you.
And before we begin with the questioning, I'm going to ask you as the audience to from now until the end of the debate, or the forum, to please keep those positive thoughts and those negative thoughts as inside thoughts, okay? We're not going to be clapping, or we won't be making any reaction to the candidates' answers. So thank you. And Aisha, for the first question.
The first two questions will cover fiscal policy, economy, and jobs. And it will go to Mr. Krishnamoorthi. So, what measures would you support in Congress to address inflation, and why do you think those measures would be effective?
Thank you for the question. Inflation is real. We have to combat it even more than we have, and we have to bring down the price of gas, groceries, and other goods. There are four factors that contribute to this. One is, of course, government spending. It's happened under Democrats and Republicans. It's happened with prescription drugs, which fortunately we are lowering the prices and expenses of as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It also is because of the Ukraine war. That has driven up both energy and food costs. And I'm proud as a member of the Intelligence Committee to do everything I can to help the Ukrainians win that war and ease the strains on energy and food costs. It also happens because of global supply chain disruptions, which unfortunately have exacerbated the situation. And then last, it happens because certain companies in certain industries. I was a former small businessman. I signed the front of the check and the back of the check. And so I believe in free enterprise and our capitalist system. But certain companies and certain industries, under the cover of inflation, have hiked prices so much beyond their costs that they've taken advantage of their market power at consumers' expense and profiteered. And we have to expose that too. I believe that we have more to do, but as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which lowers prescription drug prices, energy costs, healthcare costs, and lowers our debt, we're making a good start. Thank you.
Mr. Dargis, the same question. What measures would you support in Congress to address inflation, and why do you think those measures would be effective?
Well, there's two main drivers of inflation that we're seeing today. There's a lot of factors, but the two biggest ones are out of control government spending and this radical energy policy that is really a war on energy coming from the Biden administration, and unfortunately supported by Congressman Krishnamoorthi. The massive spending that we've seen, $4 trillion in spending over the last year and a half. I don't know about you, is anybody here feeling the benefit of that? But what it is doing is putting all those dollars into circulation, is driving inflation through the roof. When you also then wage a war on energy production at the same time, shutting down a pipeline, cutting American jobs, but signaling to the world that we are no longer serious about our energy independence. Gas, natural gas, oil, nuclear power, not bringing those to the table, raises our energy costs, and it pikes energy to manufacture goods, to grow food, and to get that from the factory or the farm to the store. All those things together are what's driving inflation. It's very simple. We need to unleash energy production in this country first and foremost. Natural gas, oil, and nuclear power. And we also need to rein in this reckless government spending. Together, those will drive down inflation. They will also create American jobs, and they will ease the burden on Illinois families. Your home energy bill, your home air conditioning bill, paying at the pump, all of those will go down. Your grocery bill will go down if we implement these measures. And unfortunately, the Congress has had 2 years to do this. This has happened since the beginning of the Biden administration, and they refuse to act. I will implement these changes as your next congressman.
May I use my rebuttal?
Yes. You have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
So the Inflation Reduction Act is actually an all of the above energy strategy. It provides incentives for the use of nuclear power. It provides incentives for the use of existing fossil fuel through carbon sequestration incentives. It also incentivizes the use of renewables. And that's why none other than Hank Paulson, the former Republican Treasury Secretary, endorsed this wholeheartedly and said that the Inflation Reduction Act is essential for lowering inflation, something that Mr. Dargis is completely against.
So I'll take one of mine and respond to that as well.
Excuse me, is there a way to turn up the sound a little bit? It's difficult to hear them.
I'll ask for technical people if you're listening. Is there a way that we can turn it up? Or we will all try and speak louder.
Or at least with the microphone. It seems like it's closer to.
It's an ABC microphone.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
I will do my best with
Trust
my
me, I'm
outdoor
the one
voice.
Thank you.
Okay. So for the you in the front row, I'm going to apologize. I will speak up for those in the back. So if I may rebut.
So 30 seconds.
So, you know, I thought the Inflation Reduction Act was actually supposed to reduce inflation, but it's been 2 months, and 2 months in a row we have seen that it has not done the job. But what it has done is it has hired 87,000 new IRS agents to squeeze more out of the poor and middle class. What it has done is raise fees on energy producers. It raised by 50% the royalty rate that gas and oil producers need to pay the government in this country. It has not done anything to restart energy production. I wish it had for all of our sakes, but that is simply not the case. We need to take action on energy today. I'm sure we'll get to it, but thank you very much.
Mr. Dargis, please comment on your position related to federal, personal, and corporate tax rates, including any changes you would make. How would the changes you make affect the federal budget and national deficit?
Well, right now, I don't know that I would make any changes to the corporate tax rates. We have, or federal or personal income tax rates. We have so many issues going on in this country right now that raising taxes on producers, raising taxes on job creators, raising taxes on individuals is simply adding more fuel to the fire that people are facing today in this economy. We need this economy growing. We don't need it shrinking. Raising taxes would be the absolute wrong thing to do, which is why one of the first things I will do when I'm in Congress is work to repeal the 87,000 new IRS agents that were voted on and funded by the bill that Congressman Krishnamoorthi voted for. We need to stabilize our tax rates. When we passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act back in 2017, we saw real wages rising. What we've seen now is real wages declining since the start of the Biden administration. Job one is getting inflation under control and restarting energy production in this country. By going after tax rates, we're simply going to add more confusion, more fuel to the fire. I'm very open to small changes, such as expanding the child tax credit and anything that we can do to help working families get by. But the first thing we need to do is repeal the IRS agents and not try to squeeze more out of the poor and middle class. I hope that we can instead redirect our priorities to inflation, to energy, and to keeping our streets safe.
Mr. Krishnamoorthi, same question. So please comment on your positions related to federal, personal, and corporate tax rates, including any changes you would make, and how would the changes you make affect the federal budget and national deficit?
Well, I think the Inflation Reduction Act is an excellent start. That's something I voted for. It institutes a 15% minimum income tax on corporations earning more than $1 billion in profit, something that my opponent is against. He is against any increase in corporate taxes. He wants to instead go back to the good old days of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the 2017 tax bill passed under Donald Trump, which added almost $3 trillion to our debt and put a cap on our state and local deductions in our suburbs. So many of you are prevented because of this bill that Mr. Dargis supports and that I voted against from being able to deduct all your state and local tax deductions. That's a huge tax increase that Mr. Dargis and Donald Trump imposed on us in the suburbs of Chicago. These 87,000 agents, they are not 87,000 agents. These are These are customer service representatives. They're database administrators. They replace 30 to 40 to 50,000 people who've left the IRS over the past 13 years because of attrition and are going to be replacing people retiring very imminently. Going back to the Trump days is not a good plan, folks. And if Mr. Dargis wants to go back to that time, let me just remind you, it plunged us into the worst recession since World War II, 25 million jobs lost. Because of the tremendous mismanagement of COVID, we also lost a lot of lives.
Thank you so much. And I'd just like to remind the candidates to speak as loud as you possibly can without sounding like you're shouting at us, so that those in the back can hear.
Questions as well. The questions need to be louder as well.
We can't hear anything back here.
Okay, thank you. We'll try our best.
The next two set of questions will cover crime and justice. This one goes to Mr. Krishnamoorthi. What 2 or 3 measures would you support or have supported in the past that would help the states make progress towards reducing violence in their communities? Why do you believe those measures would work?
Well, I think that I would continue to do more of what I've done with mayors like Gopal Lalmalani, Tom Daley, and other Republican mayors, all of whom have endorsed me. 14 mayors in the suburbs have endorsed me in my district, even though most of them are Republicans, because I've invested in local law enforcement. How? I ushered $340,000 to provide resources to the Schaumburg Police Department to deal with to provide a mobile mental health crisis unit so that we can get cops out of the mental health business and get local professionals on the scene to de-escalate situations. I also ushered $150,000 to Hoffman Estates so that they can curb the scourge of domestic violence. I'm now trying to usher $500,000 to the Elk Grove Village Police Department to deal with their substance use disorder program, a first of its kind program. We have to expand that. And so I'm proud of my work in collaboration with law enforcement to fund the police. But at the end of the day, we have to deal with another aspect of crime, which is reducing gun violence. That's a huge issue. And I have earned an F rating from the NRA after Highland Park because I called for more gun control measures to reduce violence. My opponent has earned an A rating from the NRA because he opposes all of that. That's unacceptable.
Thank you.
Same question to Mr. Dargis. What 2 or 3 measures would you support or have you supported in the past that would help the states make progress towards reducing violence in their communities? Why do you believe those measures would work?
Well, this is actually a very personal topic for me. My cousins serve on the Chicago Police Department, and I've heard from them that morale is suffering as politicians and the law continues to hamstring our law enforcement community. They tell me stories of going out in pursuit of criminals to try and keep our community safe. The criminals will lean out the window with their phones and take a selfie laughing because they know that the police are hamstrung to pursue and capture these criminals. They know that even if they're caught, they'll be back out on the street again due to lax prosecutors like Lori Lightfoot. So job number 1 is we need to prosecute crime. We need to hold criminals accountable. Anyone using a gun in a crime needs to be held in jail. They are a danger to society. We need to stop prosecutors from turning our jails into a revolving door. We need to hold people like Lori Lightfoot accountable. If she isn't going to do her job, then we need to get federal prosecutors in who will take action and do the job for her. And lastly, we need to support our law enforcement. There is a recruiting challenge for law enforcement. There is a retention problem for law enforcement. They're retiring in droves and nobody is signing up. And why would they? Why would they when they have been demonized over and over again, when they have been defunded or there's been active calls for them to be defunded? If you're a congressman in this area, you need to raise your voice. You can't be silent. You can't be absent. You need to stand up and proudly support our law enforcement. You need to actively campaign against these defund the police movement and support the police.
Thank you.
Mr. Dargis, next question. President of the United States is a job with responsibilities and privileges like no other. Do you believe that those privileges exempt existing or former presidents from accountability under the law? And is legislation required to clarify this issue?
Could you repeat the first sentence of that, please?
President of the United States is a job with responsibilities and privileges like no other. Do you believe that those privileges exempt an existing or former president from accountability under the law?
No, nobody's above the law in this country. That's first and foremost. That's a bedrock principle of how we live. No one is below the law as well, by the way. One of the key jobs of our government is to ensure that the rights of every single American citizen, regardless of position in society, regardless of where you come from, what language you speak, race, creed, or color, is protected. So if someone has violated the law, then let's let law enforcement do its job. That's what I said in my last answer. Let's let law enforcement do their job. Now, in the case of when you're going after, for example, a former president, the actions that have been taken lately clearly have been without precedent. It's a precedent. It's been clear. Commentators from the Democratic side, the Republican side have all said that we're in an unprecedented territory here. So it's okay to pursue that. We just need transparency. You know, when you see the second in command of the Washington, D.C. FBI office being relieved of duty for engaging in political activity, it just raises questions. Let's just make sure we have transparency, but then let's also make sure we definitely have accountability. If someone has violated the law, they should be held accountable. And that applies to the president as much as it applies to the criminals on the streets of Chicago or out here in the suburbs. You can't have flash mobs at Ulta and people running away laughing, knowing that they won't be prosecuted. You can't have flash mobs in Oak Brook Mall. When I was a child, if you told me there'd be a flash mob in Oak Brook Mall, I mean, that was simply unheard of growing up here in Schaumburg. So we absolutely need to hold criminals accountable, and no one is above the law.
Mr. Krishnamoorthi, the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody's above the law, not even the president or the former president of the United States. I think that what has been done at Mar-a-Lago, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, I deal with classified documents all the time. Namely in what's called a secure compartmented facility in a bunker under the United States Capitol with armed guard standing by, looking over our shoulders. In this particular case, President Trump basically hauled hundreds and hundreds of classified documents from the White House to his property at Mar-a-Lago, and when the FBI combined with the National Archives, combined with the DOJ, asked repeatedly, over and over again, for these classified documents back, he refused. Why did he refuse to do so? Nobody understands why. And so finally, they went to his property, searched for these documents after his attorneys had already said none exist at his property, and found hundreds and hundreds. And so he needs to be held accountable. Now, I have to say something about what Mr. Dargis said before about being silent. In his party, numerous members of the party have said, defund the ATF, defund the FBI. And one, Paul Gosar, said, destroy the FBI. When candidates and elected officials from the other side refuse to call out these statements for what they are, which is inflammatory and instigating political violence, that's a problem too.
We're going to take a 1-second break here for some microphones. Can we do some testing?
Yeah, it works. Testing.
Call me Roger.
Can you hear me in the back?
Roger, can you check your microphone?
Hello? 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 Can you hear?
Yeah, we'll pass back.
All right, we're ready to resume,
Yes,
gentlemen?
please.
All right, here we go.
I mean, yes, please.
Alright, Mr. Krishnamoorthi, what advice would you give to students and other young people about navigating the divisive political and partisan climate in Washington?
Well, I think, getting involved is so important. There's this old saying in Washington, D.C., which is if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And so pulling up that proverbial seat to the table is absolutely crucial to make sure that your priorities, your family's priorities, and the community's priorities are represented. And so I think it's your presence tonight, for any of you who are here, is a sign of a healthy democracy, in my opinion. I think everybody in the crowd would agree. I think there are three things that you have to do in addition to that. One is you have to vote. You have to vote. If you don't vote, someone else will. And if you want them to represent your voices at the table, that's what you're going to get. But I prefer to represent my own. So it's time everybody votes, as long as you're of voting age. The second is work in causes bigger than yourself. They can be political causes, but the point is you want to continue to advocate for missions that are bigger than perhaps your own or what's directly touching you. And then third, you have to run for office. We need more and more people to run for office. I happen to be one of 4 Indian Americans in Congress. I affectionately call us the Samosa Caucus. But we need more people running for office, for state house, for state senate, even for the U.S. Congress, though please not in my congressional district.
Same question for Mr. Dargis.
So I'll repeat the question. I'll start the timer just for those who might not have heard it. I believe it was advice to students navigating the current divisive political environment. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, first of all, try not to get caught up in it. My story of how I came to run for Congress, my family came here as refugees from Ukraine. My grandfather, my mother came here after following a war-torn Ukraine. They didn't speak much English, they didn't have much money, but they were here to fight for the American dream, for themselves and for a better life for their children. And I was raised just down the road in Schaumburg, and growing up in this community was an honor and a privilege. This was a wonderful place to grow up. And that's why, after I finished my active duty naval service with my wife Victoria and I, when we decided where we wanted to raise our family, that's why we came back here. And ultimately, community is what running for office is all about, or should be all about. It's so easy to get caught up in a divisive political rhetoric. But this job is about helping people. This job is about listening to your community and then helping them with their problems, helping them with what's facing them. And that's what brought me, I remember my wife is up there in the back, that's the conversation we had a year ago when I decided to run. I said, I cannot stand by while so many of our friends and our neighbors and our families are hurting in our community. And I said, no matter what it takes, I'm gonna put my hat in the ring and I'm gonna do my best to make a difference. And if you are in this for that reason, if you are in this to make a difference, if you are in this to make other people's lives better, not for yourself, not for your ego, not for your career, but to help others, then you will truly be rewarded, you will be blessed, and you will enjoy yourself immensely. The divisive political rhetoric, though, just stay away.
Mr. Dargis, please explain your views in campaign finance, particularly with respect to limits on campaign contributions and PACs. Are there other reforms you favor as well?
And I'm going to be the microphone because I have a teacher voice. So I'll just repeat the question for everyone. Please explain your views about campaign finance, particularly with respect to limits on campaign contributions and PACs. Are there other reforms you favor as well? Mr. Dargis.
So right now, at the federal level, I think the personal contribution limit is $2,900 and it's $5,000 for a PAC. So in order to raise the millions of dollars that Congressman Krishnamoorthi has raised, you have to do a lot of work, you have to talk to a lot of people, you have to talk to a lot of corporate interests and PACs. It's a challenge. The main thing that's important, I think, in our society, when you do that, I don't know why you necessarily need to have a limit so much as you need to have disclosure. You need to know who's contributing to whom, because you don't have those limits, by the way, at the state level. That's why you hear about gubernatorial candidates getting tens of millions of dollars. And we know who is funding those people, though. So it is a little bit more challenging for someone like myself, who's going against an incumbent, going against someone who's been there for 6 years, to raise the money when you have those small amounts, when you need millions of dollars to be competitive. Getting out there and using shoe leather and hustle also has its rewards as well. The problem, though, with disclosure is we've seen so much lately where those who donate to political campaigns, those who are exercising their First Amendment rights, have then found themselves in jeopardy. They've lost their jobs simply for participating in political conversation that somebody else doesn't like. That's a problem in this society. So I view campaign finance, I view disclosure, and I view First Amendment rights as very critical, as all intertwined and very critical to this discussion. People need to be able to participate in public life. People need to be able to participate and share their political opinions without fear of retribution in their private lives. So I hope that, I look forward to helping solve that in Congress.
Can you repeat the question?
Please explain your views about campaign finance, particularly with respect to limits on campaign contributions and PACs. Are there other reforms you favor as well?
Sure. The answer is yes, yes, and yes. The campaign finance system is completely messed up in this country, you need look no further than any kind of congressional contest or presidential contest where there are super PACs that are bringing in tens of millions of dollars into various contests. And I think that in this particular contest, I'm just fortunate to have the support of tens of thousands of donors and donations that are helping us. I know that Mr. Dargis is personally wealthy. He's put $365,000 into this particular race. And that might be a reform that we look at in the future as well. How much can individuals put of their own money into a race? But what I really favor is H.R. 1. It's the For the People Act. It gets dark money out of the system, finally. It ends Citizens United, which was a disastrous Supreme Court decision, which allowed for unlimited dark and corporate money to enter the system. And it also sets up a system of rewarding small dollar donations. I think that right now we are under these current rules. We have to play by them to change them later on. But in my particular case, I can tell you that if you ask Big Tobacco, who Time Magazine says has a jewel-shaped target on my back for going up against the vaping industry, or Johnson & Johnson, whose carcinogenic baby powder I took off the shelves, they are not people that are happy with me right now, nor are a lot of other corporations.
Thank you very much. Can we have the microphone over here?
Oh, yeah, we'll pass.
We'll pass it this way.
Okay.
Thank you.
For Mr. Krishnamoorthi, do you feel there's an issue with either voter fraud or voter access in the United States? And what is your position on passing legislation to standardize federal voting rights and voter access across the United States? Please explain.
So I think that for those people who think that 2020 involved widespread fraud and that President Biden was not rightfully elected, they are factually incorrect. There was not widespread fraud, and Joe Biden was, in fact, elected as our president. However, they have gone about enacting various measures in various states to suppress votes. They have made it harder for people to use mail-in ballots. They've made it harder to vote early. They've made it harder to get registered to vote. And so we do need to have some baseline reforms at the federal level to make sure that no states are able to either limit voter participation or to prevent people from voting altogether. And so, for instance, I support H.R. 1's measures to standardize early voting, to make it easier for people to vote by mail, to get registered easier. I also favor the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which finally deals with the discriminatory practices, especially in southern states, to suppress minority voters. We all know that they continue these suppressive tactics and they need to end. At the end of the day, our democracy is only as strong as the amount of participation on the part of the citizenry in it. And so we have to make sure everyone can vote and participate. Thank you.
Same question for Mr. Dargis.
Could you repeat that, please?
Of course. So do you feel there's an issue with either voter fraud or voter access in the United States? And what is your position on passing legislation to standardize federal voting rights and voter access across the United States?
Well, I'll start by saying that my wife and I were probably, my wife in particular was probably very surprised to hear about my wealth and I'm not hiding anything from you, I promise. But I did use some of my retirement savings to fund this campaign because, again, I didn't want to look in the mirror 20 years from now and say I took care of myself, but I didn't do anything to help the people of the community that I live in, the people that I grew up with. So that's where the money has come from. Now, I don't have the $12 million that Congressman Krishnamoorthi has, but I've done what I can. Now, with regards to the issues of voter fraud and voter access, look, we need more transparency in our system. We have heard for the last 22 years from the left and the right about problems with our voting system. We have heard selected, not elected, and then we have heard birth certificate nonsense, and now we heard Russia nonsense, and now we're hearing, you know, all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, the problem is we don't have enough transparency and accountability in our system. We need laws that can do that. If we have laws like voter ID, where people feel comfortable that it's one person, one vote, people will be more willing to accept the outcome of those votes. But we have to stop these accusations of illegitimacy and all this other nonsense that we see. You know, the congressman uses, and we have to stop terms like, they are suppressing the vote, and we all know. I mean, let's use facts and let's use reality. We know that we're talking about the Georgia voting law as one example of the oppression. First of all, it's illegal to suppress the vote already. And secondly, turnout is higher than ever in Georgia this year after that law was passed.
Thank you. Please join me as we thank Aisha for asking the questions, and help join Vivian as she comes to ask the last questions of the forum. Candidates, I do want to make note too that we'll have a new timekeeper, so you'll be looking more to your right to go.
All right, the next two questions will be about healthcare and related topics.
And you would very, very loud. We'll take the microphone. Okay. We'll talk. You're at a football game.
Okay. All right, and the first question will go first to Mr. Dargis. The recent Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court determined that the U.S.
Louder. You're a very polite footballer.
The recent Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court determined that the U.S. Constitution offers no right to have an abortion, leaving the states with the ability to legislate women's reproductive health. Do you support federal regulations governing women's reproductive health care?
So the recent Dobbs decision, all it did was take the question of abortion that's been frozen out of the democratic process for the last 50 years and return it to the democratic process. Now, I am not in favor of any kind of extremism. I would never, ever vote for any restrictions on abortion that did not include exceptions for rape, for incest, for the life of the mother, for severe fetal abnormality, and probably a whole bunch of other things that I don't know about, but that will come out in the course of debate and discussion. When you have something frozen out of the democratic process, when people don't feel that they have a voice, that's what drives extremism. Now, I don't anticipate that the laws of Illinois are going to change, and I would not support, frankly, any federal legislation, because one thing we do not need is we do not need the people of Illinois being told what our laws should be on this subject by the people of Texas or the people of Florida, or the people of California and New York for that matter. This is for the legislature of the state of Illinois to decide. This is for the women of Illinois to raise their voices, for the doctors, for all those impacted, to raise their voice, to have this debate and discussion in the legislature, and come to a compromise to take into account the fact that we are dealing with the life, but there are different circumstances, and there are different conditions that need to be taken into account. This is a very complex and fraught issue. It's very emotional, but if we want to remove the extremism, we need to give people a voice. Now, I would never vote, for example, for the extreme policies that the congressman voted for, which is abortion on demand, up to the 9th month, for any reason, at taxpayer expense. And by the way, without parental notification.
Thank you, Mr. Dargis.
First of all, that last point is completely wrong, completely misrepresents my position, but I think that's just one of a number of misrepresentations in Mr. Dargis' presentation just a moment ago. First of all, I'm proud to be endorsed by Planned Parenthood for my 100% legislative score to fight for women's reproductive freedom. My wife is an anesthesiologist. The joke is that we both put people to sleep. But what she has taught me and all other physicians and healthcare professionals is that no man and no politician like Mr. Dargis should stand between a woman and her healthcare professional with regard to her body. That is a sacrosanct and very simple concept. Now, unfortunately, Mr. Dargis, on At Issue program on WBBM, called reproductive freedom and abortion a distraction in this district. I don't think it's a distraction. When I talk to women, the vast majority of them believe passionately in having the ability to exercise control over their bodies. Now, Mr. Dargis, has earned the highest rating from Illinois Right to Life. He's made campaign contributions to them. And he says, it's very clear here. He says he supports banning abortion even in the case of rape and incest. Even in the case of rape and incest. The most extreme of extreme positions. In addition, it's not true that Illinois will be able to necessarily decide whatever it wants if Mr. Dargis gets elected to Congress. A nationwide abortion ban is in the offing.
Thank you very
Kevin
much.
McCarthy is already supporting it.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question.
What is your position regarding regulating healthcare matters for minors? For example, would you expand or limit parental consent and notification rules for health matters like gender-affirming care or birth control? And we'll start with Mr. Krishnamoorthi.
Yes, I think that's especially important right now in light of Dobbs, the Dobbs decision which overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, Mr. Dargis' positions on this are especially troublesome because he's very closely aligned with a group called the Illinois Family Institute and Illinois Family Action, which has endorsed it. This group has basically said they are against the Equality Act. And he has also taken that position. Mr. Dargis has also taken a position against the Violence Against Women Act. The Violence Against Women Act. So combined with the position that he is the highest rated person under Illinois Right to Life scorecard, which was just printed today off of their website, the fact that he would ban abortion even in the case of rape and incest, and he would basically not support the Violence Against Women Act, as well as not support allowing women to be able to exercise control over their bodies, is very troublesome. And I have to say that is a very clear contrast in this particular contest.
Could you repeat the question for me, please?
For sure.
Okay, we're in this one.
Yes.
What is your position regarding regulating healthcare matters for minors? For example, would you expand or limit parental consent and notification rules for health matters like gender-affirming care or birth control?
Thank you for the question. First, I want to say I'm learning so much about my positions today I didn't even know I had. Congressman, you need to listen. You can't hear me say that I would never vote for, I would always have exceptions for certain things and then say I never would. I mean, I ask the people here, just listen to what I'm saying. Don't listen to the political attacks and talking points. And frankly, that's really the problem and really why I'm in the race, because the congressman here is not listening. He's not listening to the district. He's not listening to the pain we're feeling from inflation and gas prices and crime. And he's not taking action to address it. Now, with regards to health care for minors, absolutely parents should be involved. Absolutely. Anyone who has been a parent knows that the child does not have the life experience to understand the consequences of medical treatments, does not have the life experience to understand what is happening to their body. I mean, anyone who's had a child that's gone through puberty understands that child is really, at times, very uncomfortable, somewhat freaked out, and a parent who has done it can take them through it and help them. When it comes to, for example, abortion, and the congressman did vote for a bill. I'm not characterizing your positions. I'm just saying what you voted for, what was in the bill. In the bill, it said you do not have to have parental notification for a minor getting an abortion, which means that somebody who is abusing your daughter and getting them pregnant can then force them to get an abortion, and you will never know about it. So I absolutely support parental involvement in the healthcare decisions of their children. Thank you.
May I use my rebuttal?
Yes, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I think the problem, and I've knocked on a lot of doors now, met a lot of constituents as well as their dogs. And even the dogs know and the constituents know, it's one thing to say something, it's another to be on the record, because that exposes hypocrisy and a problem with ethics. So that is the issue here, and we have to be very careful with what we say versus what we do. And with regard to this other bill, that's absolutely nonsense, what Mr. Dargis has said. And what we saw with regard to the 10-year-old who was forced to travel across state lines to get an abortion because she couldn't in her own state is exactly the America that you will get with Mr. Dargis.
Thank you. We'll take the microphone over here if you got it for the next question.
Right. The next question will be about environment and climate change. Congress recently passed legislation that, among other things, allocates some $370 billion in investments to renewable energy, electric vehicles, and other climate initiatives. Focusing on the climate portions of the bill alone, do you think the bill is good for America? Who will be its winners and losers? And Mr. Dargis will go first.
So you forgot to mention the name of that bill. That was the Inflation Reduction Act that has $370 billion of spending on this stuff. Now, clearly it was not intended to reduce inflation. It hasn't reduced inflation. Nobody thought it would reduce inflation. But what it has done, in addition to hiring 87,000 new IRS agents and all these other, raising fees on energy producers, is a giveaway to special interests in the wind and solar sector. Now, we need in all of the above energy policy, we absolutely need wind and solar at the table, but we need gas, and we need oil, and we need nuclear power. We're subsidizing the rich with this bill. We gave away a subsidy to buy electric vehicles. Well, what happened the moment after that bill was passed? The automakers, with their $100,000 vehicles, raised the prices by the amount of that subsidy. This is simply a giveaway. We have to have a comprehensive, all the above energy policy. We are 1 million barrels of oil a day less than where we were at the end, at the end of the previous administration. 1 million barrels of oil. We are not approving enough leases. We are slow walking leases. We are sending a signal that we are not in the business of long-term energy security. Natural gas has reduced carbon emissions for the last 15 years in this country. Nuclear power will do even more. That is where we need to be investing, because that will lower costs for American consumers and will get this economy moving again, and that will create actual jobs.
Thank you.
Second question. Can you repeat the question, please?
Congress recently passed legislation that, among other things, allocates some $370 billion in investments to renewable energy, electric vehicles, and other climate initiatives. Focusing on the climate portions of the bill alone, do you think the bill is good for America? Who will be the winners and losers?
Well, I think it is good for America. That is why so many Republicans support this particular bill, including Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, no liberal Democrat. This is what it does. It increases oil and gas permitting on federal lands for the first time. It also provides subsidies for the operation of nuclear plants. And that's important for Illinois because we have 11 nuclear plants operating at 6 sites, providing 50% of our state's power. We are the state that produces the most nuclear power in the country, and therefore this will be very helpful to us. We also see carbon sequestration credits to allow for continued fossil fuel generation, and of course an investment in renewables, and that is significant. Overall, this has been scored by the Committee on Responsible Federal Budgets as lowering overall debt by $1 trillion over the next 2 decades. That's a lot of debt reduction through this bill. I have to say this Inflation Reduction Act does some other things which unfortunately my opponent wants to reverse. It lowers prescription drug prices for the first time against the wishes of the pharmaceutical industry. This is crucial for our seniors. Putting a cap of $35 a month for insulin, lowering their out-of-pocket cost to no more than $2,000 per year. Now it's $5,000 to $10,000 in many cases, as well as allowing the federal government to negotiate for the price of prescription drugs for the first time. That's why the National Committee that Preserves Social Security and Medicare has endorsed me, and I'm proud of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I feel like C-SPAN with the one camera.
All right. The next 2 questions will be about education and social justice policies and programs. What 2 or 3 items would you like to see included in any immigration legislation? And would you support a bill that included those items, even if it meant compromising on other parts of the bill? Mr. Krishnamoorthi.
Thank you for the question. I'm an immigrant myself. I'm one of the few naturalized citizens in Congress, and so this touches me very personally. Look, I think that right now the most recent episode on the border exposes the fact that we have a broken border, we have a broken immigration system, and both have to be fixed. With regard to the border, I'm willing to work with Republicans who have put forward good solutions to deal with it. Republican Senator Mr. Cornyn from Texas has actually ushered a solution forward with regard to putting more resources into Customs and Border Patrol, as well as immigration court personnel to cull through the legitimate asylum claims versus the illegitimate ones and turn away the illegitimate ones humanely. Vicente Gonzalez, a Democrat from the border of Texas, has put forward another interesting idea, which is creating safe zones in Central America so people can go and apply for asylum there without being smuggled hundreds of miles north through Mexico to our borders and overwhelming the border authorities. But we have to recognize, folks, our legal immigration system is completely messed up. People who apply legally to work here or to come here are oftentimes not able to do so in any timely fashion. And the net result is that we hurt our economy, we hurt our country, and we prevent the incredible prosperity that came with the first killer competitive app the United States possessed, which was a great immigration system.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please?
What 2 or 3 items would you like to see included in any immigration legislation? And would you support a bill that included those items, even if it meant compromising on other parts of the bill? You have 90 seconds.
Well, very simply, the 3 things are: we need to secure our border, we need to get a guest worker program going in this country so we can bring people in and know who they are who just want to work here, and we need to improve the legal immigration system. Those 3 things will work. And it's wonderful actually to be up here with Congressman Krishnamoorthi with his immigrant story. I'm a first-generation American myself. My mother is actually in the back. She was a refugee after World War II from Ukraine. My wife is an immigrant. She's gone through the naturalization process. So we have some experience in my family as well. And that's really the wonderful thing, as I've learned going through our community, is that every single person in our community, everyone has their own story. That's what's amazing about where we live, is everyone has a story, everyone comes from somewhere, and everyone has this amazing family background, and it's all this wonderful melting pot, this wonderful tapestry of our community that allows us to learn and live and work with each other. Look, we need to secure the border, though. This is a pro-immigration country, but it's also pro-law and order. When you don't have a secure border, you have human trafficking and human suffering. You have billions of dollars going to the cartels. You have dozens of people that we know of on the terror watch list that have been caught crossing our border. And you have fentanyl coming through through our border like nobody's business. Now that is killing 300 Americans a day. That's one plane load of Americans dying due to fentanyl in our country. It's fueling crime and it's fueling American tragedy. Now that's also, by the way, coming now in the shape of little candy-colored fentanyl pieces, just in time for Halloween. So this is a crisis that needs to be taken care of. We can reform our border. I know this is a wonderful area. I'd love to work with Democrats and Independents and Republicans on this.
Thank you so much.
We can reform our immigration system.
Thank you.
Oh, you want my, okay.
The cost of college and resulting debt have frequently been in the headlines this year. What ideas do you have for making a college education more affordable and or for addressing how the student loan process works? We'll go to Mr. Dargis.
And gentlemen, you have 90 seconds.
We're getting a little loose with the time lately. So yes, cost of college is certainly a major issue. College has far outstripped the inflation in this country for the last couple of decades, and it's making it more difficult for people to go to college and to afford it. Now there are ways, however. One of the ways that we should not be making college more affordable is by having the 2/3 of Americans who have not gone to college pay the debts of those who have. We should not be having those who are responsible and paid for their own college education, as I did or as my sons are doing by serving in the United States military, pay for other people's colleges. There are lots of people with private debt out there. We should not be having plumbers and truck drivers and service members pay for Harvard lawyers making up to $250,000 a year, because that's what this program allows, by the way. So wrong thing to do, something that Congressman Krishnamoorthi calls a good idea. I say that is Robin Hood in reverse. But there are things that can be done. We do need investigation into why it is our college graduates can't afford to pay their bills. What is wrong with our college education system? What is wrong with college tuition? If it is that out of control, that this is such a national crisis, it needs to be investigated. This is not simply a matter of just telling people, good luck, you're on your own. But the wrong way to do it is to have $500 billion come out of taxpayers' pockets for somebody else's private debts. But there is a way. I look forward to this investigation as to why college is so unaffordable and why are colleges raising their fees and tuition so much higher than the rate of inflation. The congressman likes to go after businesses and job creators. Let's go after college administrators and see what's going on here.
Thank you. The cost of college and resulting debt have frequently been in the headlines this year. What ideas do you have for making a college education more affordable and/or for addressing how the student loan process works? You have 90 seconds.
I think we put too much emphasis on this country on people going to four-year college. And as a consequence, we put way too much money into four-year college at the expense of other forms of post-secondary education. That's why working with my colleague, G.T. Thompson, a Republican from Pennsylvania, we modernize our nation's vocational and career technical education system so that the 2/3 of Americans who don't have a four-year college degree get a high-quality post-secondary experience as well. Because even if a four-year college degree isn't for everybody, a high-quality post-secondary experience needs to be for everyone. So we actually increased resources for it and required that community colleges, just like Harper College, as well as others, collaborate with local employers in forming the curricula that leads to students getting access to the greatest social welfare program devised by human beings, and that's a job, a job. If a post-secondary education doesn't lead to a job and a career, then it's not a good post-secondary educational experience. So we have to put much more resources into that, and that's why I had so many problems with the student debt relief program that the Biden administration put forward, because it doesn't do enough to both lower the cost of college and to help others who may not have gone to four-year college, and to encourage others to go to two-year college or technical school, as it were. Finally, one of my biggest priorities is to lower the cost of college. I'll talk about it in the next question.
Thank you. We need the mic.
Okay. Mine and Mike. Here you go.
All right, our last two questions will be about international affairs. Do you agree with how the U.S. has handled its support of Ukraine in the war with Russia? What, if anything, would you like to see the U.S. do differently? Mr. Krishnamoorthi.
Well, I think this is an area where Mr. Dargis and I probably have some agreement. With regard to Ukraine, we have to help the Ukrainians fight and win this war so that we don't have to go to war. That's what it boils down to. The Russians invaded Ukraine. They invaded a sovereign nation. As a member of the Intelligence Committee, I'm very proud of my work with Republicans and others to usher aid, both military assistance and humanitarian assistance, to the front lines to make sure the Ukrainians had what they needed to repel the Russians. So far, the Ukrainians have done a valiant job. They fiercely battled the Russians and now are making battlefield gains. What I'm most concerned about is Vladimir Putin, because Vladimir Putin, he is an authoritarian dictator who is hell-bent on invading and basically changing the regime in Ukraine. And now he's talking about nuclear saber rattling. I have made it very clear, as well as some of my colleagues, that the Russian military doctrine, which he's talking about, which is escalate to de-escalate, the use of battlefield nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction, would leave Vladimir Putin in a worse off position than were he not to use it. We're trying to communicate that in every way, shape, or form, and to provide the Ukrainians with more arms and more sophisticated weaponry, including the HIMARS and the ATACMS and so forth.
The time has elapsed.
So I appreciate this question. Again, very personal for me with my family having come from Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine. I've walked the streets of Ukraine. It's heartbreaking seeing newscasters on the same streets I've walked, seeing the damage and destruction in the background. But I do agree that we should be supporting Ukraine because it's in the American interest to push back on this unprovoked Russian aggression. But unfortunately, the Biden administration has been weak, incredibly weak on this from the get-go. The first thing the Biden administration did when they came into office They shut down the Keystone Pipeline. They signaled to the world, first of all, that cost American jobs, but they signaled to the world that we weren't serious about our energy independence and that raised the cost of oil and enriched tyrants like Putin. There was this debacle of a withdrawal from Afghanistan that veterans like myself were just appalled by, but that showed weakness to the world and it emboldened tyrants like Vladimir Putin. Then when we had hundreds of thousands of troops, or he had that many troops massed on the border of Ukraine, what did President Biden say? He said they could probably take Kiev inside of 48 hours. He said if there was a minor incursion, we might not do anything. Well, if you're Vladimir Putin and you've seen all this, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to invade. We could have, now it's Vladimir Putin's fault, but we could have done more to put in a strong deterrence. We know from our past as a military man, strong deterrence is what gets the job done. And then since then, it's been reactive, too little, too late to get them HIMARS. We should be getting them anti-missile defense. We should be getting them anti-air defense. We see Putin's reign of terror, bombing playgrounds, bombing apartment buildings. There is more to be done. I'm glad we're supporting them, but we need to do more.
Can I please have a second?
I have you used both, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. Could I use my third rebuttal? Okay.
They have a microphone.
And this is your last question, gentlemen.
Do I have any rebuttals left?
You have one.
Oh, yeah.
How would you characterize the Chinese government? What tactics do you believe the United States should emphasize in its diplomatic and economic relations with them? Please explain. We'll start with Mr. Dargis.
Could you repeat that? I apologize. I know, sorry.
How would you characterize the Chinese government? What tactics do you believe the United States should emphasize in its diplomatic and economic relations with them? Please explain.
Well, the Chinese government is our #1 national security threat and economic threat to the United States. They have openly stated that they want to supplant the United States on the world stage. They have openly stated that we are their adversary, and yet we continue to act naively towards China. You know, we are not taking the steps we need to protect ourselves, protect our industry. We need to reshore manufacturing. We need to reshore critical industries like pharmaceutical manufacturers so that China cannot hold us hostage in the future. If we're serious about battery technology, we need to bring that back to the United States, and we need to get sources for these critical minerals that are required to build batteries to power electric vehicles. There is so much that needs to be done. We've taken a small step with the Bipartisan CHIPS Act, which I would have supported if I was in Congress at the time. But there is much more that can be done. Talk and bluster does not get us anywhere. The mantra of speak softly and carry a big stick seems to be flipped on its head with this current Congress and this current president. We are blustering and bluffing, but we are doing very little to actually counter the Chinese threat. We need to stop subsidizing the Chinese government. We need to be serious about our trade secrets. We need to be serious about their espionage. And I think this is an area where we can work very strongly with bipartisan cooperation. I was a naval intelligence officer when I served in the Naval Reserve after my active duty time. I understand the threat that China poses. They are getting ready to invade Taiwan. This is not a secret. We need to get our military ready and our country ready.
Thank you for the question. I just have to go back to something. The Keystone Pipeline had nothing to do with Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. That was absolutely a decision by Vladimir Putin to erase Ukraine from the map of the earth. And I think that type of comment really undermines our united front against Vladimir Putin. And President Biden should be commended for assembling the international coalition to deal with Vladimir Putin at this point. I visited Rzeszów, Poland, on the border with Ukraine, and I can't tell you how much the Ukrainians and others were so appreciative of our support. We have to stand in the fight with them, united, and leave the politics behind. With regard to CCP and China, the Chinese Communist Party is our #1 national security threat. It's a threat to our military security and to our commercial security. When I was a small businessman, the CCP actively tried to steal technology from my small business. And now they've perfected this on an industrial scale. But besides that, they are throwing their elbows militarily in their neighborhood, whether it's the South China Sea, whether it's on the border with India, and whether it's Taiwan. In that regard, I'm proud to have visited Taiwan this past summer, even though the CCP, through its minions, threatened to shoot down our plane en route to Taiwan, and they did interfere with our journey. That being said, we have to stand with the Taiwanese because they are facing yet another aggressive regime in this world, a regime, China, that will do exactly what Vladimir Putin did in Ukraine, but this time in the Far East.
Thank you.
So I would like to use my final rebuttal.
You have 30 seconds.
So energy is actually incredibly key to this discussion with China and with Russia. We have drained the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. In the last 6 months, we have lost 40 years. We are back to the lowest level of 40 years in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as more Chinese aggression is looming. We have shut down oil and natural gas production in this country. When you shut down oil production in this country, you lose your leverage, as we saw when Saudi Arabia and the other OPEC Plus countries decided to cut production. We have no leverage. We used to have leverage. We have also shut down natural gas production in this country. It is a clean fossil fuel. It has lowered carbon emissions in this country for 15 minutes. We could be supporting our allies like Germany instead of making them fire up coal plants.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking Vivian. We'll now move to closing statements. You will be happy to hear that you have 2 minutes. And we'll begin with Mr. Krishnamoorthi.
This Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Thank you for the league organizing tonight's debate. I am so honored. This is the honor of my lifetime to represent you in the United States Congress. I've been there 3 terms, and I'm seeking a contract extension for a 4th. And here's why. As I told you about my life story, I've also found that nothing can get done in that mission statement where this country can stand with the next families who need it unless we do it in a bipartisan fashion. That's why I'm so proud to have led the charge against the e-cigarette industry, which is preying on our children with the youth vaping epidemic. Also to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to finally ban the trading of individual stocks in Congress and to ban insider trading. We have to make sure Congress puts your interests ahead of their pocketbooks. I also am proud to lead the opposition with a lot of mayors, Republicans and Democrats, against the merger of the Canadian Pacific Kansas City Southern Railroad. I believe that in its current form, this merger will devastate our communities. I also am proud to work with our communities to continue to usher local resources for their various priorities and to make sure that we can protect our children and babies. So I'm leading the investigation on a bipartisan basis into toxic heavy metals in baby foods and trying to end that scourge as well. At the end of the day, however, there are contrasts between Mr. Dargis and myself. The most notable are, I have an F rating from the NRA. My colleague here, Mr. Dargis, has an A rating from the NRA. I believe in a women's reproductive freedom. Unfortunately, Mr. Dargis has the highest rating from Illinois Right to Life. I believe that is in total why 14 mayors have endorsed me, the Daily Herald and the Tribune as well. Thank you so much, and I request your vote.
Mr. Dargis, you have 2 minutes.
Not 2 minutes and 3 seconds.
I'm a little flexible.
That's fine. Thank you. I appreciate that. So thank you again to League of Women Voters. Thank you again to the Congressman for being here. Look, I think the choice is clear. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, as he stated, has been in office for 6 years. He has had an opportunity to get us back on track, and we see the results of his votes. He has voted 100% with the Biden administration, 100% for the policies that have given us inflation that we haven't seen in 40 years, gas prices that we've never seen, crime that is rising out of control, and a border that is completely open. Now, that's just simply facts. Those aren't talking points. Those are votes. That's what's happening. But it is time for a change. I am running to solve the problems facing the people of the district. Not just come in and talk about them, but to deliver results as I've done my entire career, to serve this community as I did for 20 years when I was in the military. I know what it means to put duty and honor and country and people ahead of my own needs. I'm not doing this for a career. I'm doing this because I sincerely, genuinely want to help solve the problems facing the people of this district. We have to set aside the partisan attacks. We have to get focused on delivering solutions. I will work with Democrats, I will work with independents, and I will work with like-minded Republicans to solve the problems facing our community. Now, I've had people endorse me as well. I've had Al Lynch, Medal of Honor winner, living here in Illinois. I'm very proud of that endorsement because he understands that I will act with integrity. I've had Tom Roser, the CEO of Auto Engineering, because he knows I'm going to be on the side of businesses and workers, whether they have a college degree or not, to help get this economy moving again. And I've had the endorsement of Marty Garcia, who is a trade worker, a bricklayer, because he knows that I'm on the side of the working man. I'm on the side of the person that's to get up every day and work with their hands and put in the effort and just wants a peaceful life to take care of their children. I appreciate your vote in November. Together we can deliver the change we need.
Candidates in Harper College and our students, Isha and Vivian, for taking part in On behalf of the League of Women Voters in Harper College, thank you all for coming. And don't forget, early voting begins on October 24th. There is information about voter registration, voting districts, and candidates available on the lwvpalatinearea.org and illinoisvoterguide.org. We encourage you all to participate in our democracy by casting your vote. Please vote. Good night. Thank you.